Hello, my name is David Gill, and I'm going to be doing a speech on open source and its impact on the economy. Open source is software whose code is freely available, or hardware whose schematics or blueprints are freely available. I am a software developer with over 20 years of experience, and the problem the open source community is attempting to resolve is attempting to make innovations that are normally proprietary freely public, and it's attempting to reduce costs, increase the opportunities for collaboration over the standard intellectual property protected methods that we typically see with corporations. And with this, there's going to be some clear winners and losers. Some of the winners are going to be developers. It provides an opportunity for new developers to learn, and even for more senior developers, it provides an opportunity to contribute code that can be directly referenced on resumes. So employers have the opportunity to actually see work that developer has done. Now, the consumers have some clear wins and with freely available software such as LibreOffice or Linux, but they also have the opportunity for the dramatically reduced cost products such as Raspberry Pi or 3D printed prosthetics. Uh, uh, Startup businesses, it also helps them compete with larger corporations, not only through less expensive software, but with the opportunity for those smaller businesses to collaborate on projects. A 2023 paper published by the Harvard Business School titled "The Value of Open Source Software" is cited as saying firms would need to spend 3.5 times more on software than they currently do if the open source community did not exist. The Harvard, that same paper is also cited as estimating the accumulated value of the open source community's code that's been contributed as having a financial value of approximately 8.8 trillion with a T dollars. Now, there are clear and easy losers in this. Software vendors certainly have less of an opportunity to make money than what they previously had or would have if the open source community did not exist. The open source community was enacted sort of unofficially since the 1970s. There was no open way. There was no schematic way to be able to share this. It was kind of shared more openly. But in 1998, in February of 1998, the Open Source Initiative was founded by Eric Raymond and Bruce Perens, and this happened actually only 1 month after Netscape released its source code, which Netscape later would become Firefox. And since that time, there have been significant improvements to the open source community. There's more people that contribute, and then also the GNU General Public License has been developed, and it's a legal document. It's intended to provide the developer, with the freedom to maintain and distribute your product, and it limits others the ability to ask or force you to surrender your code or your product. That GPL it also provides a fairly strong liability disclaimer in it as well. Since its initiation, there have been more government contributions than originally. Now, this all hasn't happened without incurred costs. Many of these developers, they don't get paid. Actually, the vast majority of them don't get paid. They do it because they enjoy it. They can frequently get burnout of their project. Maybe something changes in their life, and they're just simply no longer able to contribute to that product. There's, of course, costs behind servers, cloud computing time, and if you have a large enough repository, you can actually incur costs from simply needing to store and maintain your code. There's a cost behind the security flaws being visible. So a human could go through and read code that's frequently used and find security flaws. The same could be done by an AI agent. And then another, and what is, in my opinion, the most significant cost, is that nobody is held accountable. I know I mentioned briefly before that the GPL has that strong disclaimer, and that contributes to the fact that nobody is accountable. And then also, before I was mentioning there was burnout, it means nobody's held accountable to forcing this product to always be available. So with this speech, one of the main things I wanted to do was go over the 7 principles of sound public policy and how open source is applicable to this. The first principle is that free people are not equal, and that equal people are not free. In the open source community, everyone is free to participate. However, those participations might not wind up being enjoyed equally. One company or one developer may contribute more, and other companies, and especially the general public, may wind up receiving more of a benefit than the people contributing. And that winds up creating inequality. However, these people are providing this contributions for free and free of choice. Principle 2 is what belongs to you, you tend to take care of. What belongs to no one or everyone tends to fall into disrepair. What's important with an open source project is that there are owners. Typically, if there's not an owner of a project, it's going to fall into disrepair. And this is a good reference for the tragedy of commons that can occur where nobody officially owns it, so nobody maintains it, so it falls to the wayside. Principle 3 is that sound policy requires that we consider long-run effects in all people, not simply short-run effects in a few people. In the short term, this is going to hurt software vendors and corporations that sell software. In the long term, there's going to be a significant impact or increase to the economy. A 2021 study entitled "The Impact of Open Source Software and Hardware on the European Economy," which was published by the European Commission, found that a 10% increase in open source activity could or did potentially raise the GDP by approximately 0.5%. And this was contributed to about an annual increase of 80 billion euros. In the long run, in my opinion, these innovations outweigh the short-term costs or losses for corporations or software vendors. Principle 4 is if you encourage something, you get more of it. If you discourage something, you get less of it. To encourage it, things you could do or that the public could do is governments and companies could continue funding it. That's an encouragement. People using software that's open source is probably the most significant encouragement that you can do. Nobody wants to work on a project that absolutely nobody uses. If nobody's using it, usually you just move on and you don't continue working on that project. Also, public funding can be provided to some of the open source community projects. And common thing that will happen is once you contribute, you'll pay for some of those server costs I was mentioned before, cloud computing time, but sometimes some of these issues are complicated. And what will happen is those projects will make a bounty to say, hey, general public, if you can solve this problem, we'll provide this many dollars to somebody who solves it. Now, things that you can do to discourage it would wind up being patent laws or especially restrictive policies that discourage sharing. That would make it dramatically more difficult for the open source community to continue to thrive. Principle 5 is that nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as they spend their own. In the open source community, the contributors tend to be the people paying the money. If I make a product and I require cloud computing time, it's almost certainly going to wind up coming out of my bank account. By contrast, proprietary projects are often funded by outside investors, and they tend to overspend or allocate resources inefficiently, since it's essentially somebody else's money. Principle 7 is the government has nothing to give anybody except what it's first taken from somebody, and the government that's big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything that you've got. When the public funds are used for proprietary software, it means that the public doesn't get to use that software, see it, or reuse it. If instead public funds were used in the open source community, that software could potentially be later reused. For example, CRMs is a customer relations management software, or an ERP, which is an enterprise resource planning software. They're very common to be used in the government. And I cannot think of a business model that would not utilize them. So if you were investing as the government into these, and then you were then freely making these available to the general public, companies would be able to utilize these and start up a business more easily, having access to more robust software. Principle 7 is liberty makes all the difference in the world. This is actually the reason why I chose open source as my subject. I mean, obviously, I have an interest for it, but in my opinion, open source and its embodiment of liberty. It gives you the freedom to use it, to modify it, to share it as you want. It gives the community a place to share their knowledge together. It's this freedom, it drives innovations, it lowers barriers to entry, and it dramatically expands opportunities, especially when more senior developers or engineers have the opportunity to work with people who are either less senior or just have an interest in something and want to learn. Those people who are learning have the opportunity to potentially go into a market that they did not have any opportunity or knowledge of previous. So in closing, I would like to say that open source, in my opinion, efficiently addresses the problem it set out to solve. It unrestricts innovation, it reduces development costs, and it provides more equal access to technology. It's created trillions of dollars in global value. It's reduced software costs by more than 50% for organizations that do use it. And it's accelerated innovations in nearly every industry, a great modern example being AI. Now, this doesn't come without concerns. There can be funding shortages. There's the security concerns I mentioned about being able to see the code. And there's the risk of utilizing overwork and underpaid worker or labor that is not being held accountable. The open source movement aligns closely with the 7 principles of sound public policy. It promotes liberty, efficiency, and long-run economic growth. The open source proves that, in my opinion, that voluntary contributions can outperform corporations. For example, Linux operating system hosts more than 95% of the web servers in the world, and also the Android and iOS are built off of both 2 separate open source operating systems. The open source is by no means a perfect system, but however, it's a wonderful example of how free people solving a shared problem can drive innovations. Again, my name is David Gill, and this speech was on the open source and its impact on the economy. Thank you.